Fintech Podcast, brought to you by Tier 1 People, the leaders in executive search for Fintech ventures.
Welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where Fintech leaders join me for a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and today's guest is Stevie-Ann Dovico, CIO of Beyond Bank. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a fintech show, Dexter. Why are you featuring a community bank? Well, back in 2020, I made a prediction that we'd see fintech and banking talent move to the community bank space. And Stevie-Ann's move caused me to take notice. As a rising star in NAB's executive ranks, she was awarded Executive Leader of the Year by Women in Digital. So it was a real statement by Beyond Bank to make this hire. I chat to Stevie-Ann about how her background working with Westpac and the Reinventure Fund is coming full circle as she sees close alignment with fintech and community banks. We discuss the best strategies for fintechs to partner with community banks, and Stevie-Ann shares her leadership tips on how to make the switch from Big Four bank to a smaller business. But before today's interview, if you're new to the show, please follow us on your podcast player. And if you're coming back, thanks for your support. And if you're feeling super generous, please share this episode with your network. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining me. Really nice to see you again. Guess, first of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about Beyond Bank and some of the reasons why you've joined?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, Beyond Bank's one of Australia's largest customer-owned banks and one of the biggest B Corps in the country. So for people who don't know what a B Corp is, that's kind of a score that measures your company's social and environmental impact. And that's both something we're super proud of, but also something that's deeply rooted in the culture. Beyond Bank has a huge and real focus on being a customer-owned bank. So our members are owners of the bank, and then all the money that's made kind of goes back into the bank to continue to either protect or create or grow and return that value, which is slightly different to, say, the slant of a bigger bank, which would have, or a corporation or whatever that has shareholders and have to pay dividends and profits and that kind of stuff. We're particularly focused on supporting communities. So last year, we partnered with over 5,000 community organisations and worked with them on some of society's most pressing issues at the moment, like housing affordability or helping older Australians and driving stronger levels of financial well-being. And we're a relationship-led bank, so a big part of my role in tech, say, is to ensure that actually we're always thinking about technology and in the context of how it can empower our frontline to have better and more meaningful interactions with our customers. So getting the data right and thinking about ways to use kind of proven and nascent technology to ensure our frontline can do their job really easily is a big part, and also the branch tech. So, kind of cutting against the grain a little bit. We're actually more likely to open branches because we see that it's a big part of how we do banking and how we service our customers than not.
One of the things that really kind of struck me when we had the kind of neobank push in 2018, 2019, was that one of the kind of promises, I think the kind of ideals that they held was very much going back to the banking that you've talked about, the bank being the cornerstone of the community. One of the issues that we've seen obviously over the last 10, 12 years is constant talk about there needing to be consolidation in the space to be able to compete. Where does Beyond Bank sit there?
So we are, we've got a history in consolidation. So, we're a bank that's grown by merger. And I think in the industry, you'll see that, and even more and more consolidation as we progress. And I think that's probably a good thing. Certainly from a regulator's perspective, because there's less little kind of banks to manage. So, yeah, and I think that's like, that just helps us grow strength. I think there is an inherent strength in numbers. I think with the mutual industry, what's really lovely about it is there's real collaboration for good. So, it's not like, in the big banks, I couldn't just call up my ear and be like, oh, how are you tackling this problem? Yeah. Whatever. It was very like, no, that's kind of against the competitive, rules or whatever. Whereas like, I run a mutual CIO council where all the CIOs from the mutuals come together and talk about like, what are the challenges we're facing, and, how might we, help our customers better, or, all of that kind of stuff, which is really amazing and supportive. And I see like real synergy between fintechs and say the mutual banks. I mean, we've got very similar problems, like both putting, like, especially early stage, startups where you're like putting all your money back into the business to grow the business, and like you're attracting people that are really like linked to the cause and are purpose driven, as opposed to like people that you could just pay heaps of money for, and like it's really good. Like I'm looking forward to kind of working more with fintechs and all that kind of stuff because of that synergy.
I wanted to ask you about that. I was probably going to cover this later on, but that you brought it up, I think it's probably worthwhile us just covering it now. One of the things that I've found working with fintechs, and particularly some of the large kind of banking software businesses that might be international, they look at Australia and they go, "Oh, great, the mutual sector." It's kind of let the money rain down, right?
Yeah.
And you try to explain to them that there ain't that much money there. And, you think you're the only person coming into town with the silver bullet. There's just so much competition out there. And unfortunately, kind of what I do see is there's a lot of promises being sold to businesses that aren't like a big four bank and can just write off a, $50 million investment in technology and go, "Oh yeah, forget it." That's kind of, people's jobs and branches closed. What's been your experience so far as to, the kind of the challenges of, working with a software player or a fintech when you're actually, you're not the big four bank with a lot of leverage and you can just throw money at things, but you have to really get it right first time?
Yeah, I think so. If we talk about like kind of working with fintechs and startups and all of that kind of stuff, as I said, I think that mutual and fintech partnership is a really complementary partnership. Like a lot of common things with fintechs, as I said, like all our money goes back into the business. We don't have loads of money to spend on expensive partnerships. So that means we really need to ruthlessly prioritize and think about every dollar we spend and make sure that like every dollar that we're spending is actually driving value for our customers and communities. And it's often kind of really tricky, as you said, to like either pay for big contracts. In fact, like they're really difficult for us to do, or even like when you talk about talent management, like trying to attract really expensive talent is just too hard because like we don't have the scale to have these large in-house teams. So kind of our operating model is largely like buy or partner, and in that model, it's actually a really rich space for fintechs. And like I encourage them to focus on this space because if you're trying to get into the bigger organizations, not just banks, it's quite tricky because you're going to have like a lot of governance and a lot of hurdles to go through. And even just like the procurement cycle and the bureaucracy like of that is really hard. Like I've been there. And then
your main sponsor resigns and goes to Beyond Bank.
And there's a lot of that movement. And the thing is and this isn't a new problem. Like 10 years ago, I was doing this work actually when I was in strategy innovation with Westpac, and we had just established the Reinventure Fund, so the first venture capital fund. We were doing work with Stone and Chalk and Fishburners and all, and like my whole job at that point was to like work out how do we reduce the time it takes to get fintechs into the bank, because it was just so the time it took for the procurement cycle to go through was just huge. Let's call it 12 months, and we kind of looked at like, well, how might we get that to 90 days? Because you just can't apply that kind of cookie cutter procurement process.
Yeah, and not for a startup, 12 months you're out of business. Right?
It wasn't working. So that was, it's like an age-old problem. I don't think anyone's cracked it, but it is much easier to work with like smaller kind of banks or even companies, because while you have that, it's still highly regulated banking industry, you still have that like a little bit more flexibility in the way, and you don't have to adhere to specific panels most of the time and all of that kind of stuff. So.
One of the things I wanted to ask you was kind of where you and you touched on this in the intro, that you're actually investing in more branches and face-to-face. As a technologist, like, where do you see the kind of balance? And, fintech is a force for good. I truly believe it, but I'm also really skeptical of a lot of people who are like, we're going to democratize this by pay advance on your salary and charging you 10%. It's like, it's kind of, okay, you're not really democratizing anything. Where do you kind of see the balance between fintech being a force for good? And there's a lot of talk at the minute around AI and how that's going to take people's jobs. And the reality is, if you're a community business, the community relies on jobs and all of those things. Where do you see that balance kind of between, running a business, serving customers, being digitally efficient, maximizing digital, but also knowing that, hey, there is a lot, right?
There's a lot, right? But it's like actually like a peer into like how my brain goes daily. I think, so there's a lot. I think we jump to these really exciting nascent technologies because like we think they're cool and new and whatever, and like, oh, here's this like silver bullet. Like, I don't think there is a silver bullet. I think the reality is you've got to have a think about the problem you're trying to solve. And really, like, let's not fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem. Well, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And does that require the use of nascent or proven technology? And like, if you don't need nascent technology, like maybe that's not the best idea. Yeah. And then I think there's the other layer is like, have a think about, back to like all of these challenges, the business model congruence of generative AI or AI or automation or any of those like human replacing type of tools or human assisting type of tools, because like in a mutual bank, we are like, even in mergers, like one of the foundational requirements is everyone gets a job. Yeah. So like, even if you looked at that purely financially, that means your people line will always stay the same. And if you're trying to use technology that reduces the amount of people that you need, then in this business model, all that does is introduce a bigger technology line and holds the people line flat, and therefore your expenses are high. And like in an environment where you're really like focused on cost to income, that just doesn't make sense. So that's kind of where I think about business model congruence. But I do like, I think I really encourage new ways of solving age-old problems or problems that we try to solve. I just think you should be looking at like some really basic fundamentals around like, is like problem solution, fear, like business model congruence, how do you measure these sort of things? And people try to invent all these measurements, but I'm like, well, like business are measured, like business growth is measured on business. So, like is this going to make us more money, or is this going to help us reduce cost? Is this going to increase customer satisfaction? The kind of basic pillars of like, oh, is this going to work, or is this a good idea? Like, keep using those frameworks. But you don't, I just falling in love with the solution, just kind of
You touched on some of the great initiatives that you're involved in around things like, trying to, the housing affordability, helping the kind of aging population as well. Again, like, where do you see the kind of balance between what digital and technology can do to help that, and how much is it of just thinking about the problem in a different way?
Yeah, I think, it's both. Like, a lot of these big problems like tend to read themselves in human to human conversations. And that, you know, that's why we've got the really rich brand strategy. And in fact, it's a thing that we're known for, is human to human conversations. And like you talk to, and we do a customer event at every board. So every month we'll do a customer event somewhere in the country, and we'll talk to our customers, and like a lot of them are lifelong customers, and you kind of say to them like, oh, why do you love, like, why are you still here? Like, why do you love your bank? And they're like, oh, because it's the best. And you're like, tell me more. Yeah. And they're like, oh, you know, and they'll start talking to you about like the person they'll tell you the branch manager's name or the person they talk to, and like how they've seen them through like all of their like periods of their life. And, you know, like I think that's the beauty of banking, is actually when you're dealing with money, it's kind of hopefully a constant in people's lives. And so you do get that opportunity to really be part of those like massive life moments from birth to death, right? And so that's your real opportunity to like create value for customers. And so I think like it's really like one of the big things that we're like thinking about is how do we replicate that really beautiful, rich, like empathetic human relationship we have with customers in our traditional segments, face to face, in a world where increasingly like new segments will want to bank online and to interact with us online, and like you know, using technology to be able to create and leverage insights that are really valuable for customers, but without losing that human touch. That's a really important thing.
Yeah. I mean, all the things that you've talked about there are things that, you know, the big four banks aspire to do. If you see the ads, you know, they've got a very different impression of how they're perceived on an ad than, you know, a lot of their customers would perceive them. Having moved into something smaller, do you see there's a lot more congruency between kind of what you put in the brand and what you put in the ads and what you see day to day happen within the business?
It's actually part of the reason I joined. Like, actually, everything's so anchored to customer and community. Like from like any business case you write will like literally have the 3 C's. Like it's people talk and know their customers so intimately. Like it's part of our philosophy, customers and communities. And you see it, like as I said, in the community events, it's not just talking to customers, but we'll have our community partners, and you get to hear like from real like organizations that otherwise wouldn't get a lot of funding. Like we kind of partner with them to give them money to do things like housing affordability and youth you know, employment and all of these kinds of things. And you just like, everyone is so touched and involved in these kinds of initiatives. So like, I think it's a different bend. I mean, but like, and look, in big banks, there's millions and millions of customers. It's actually infinitely harder to do, you know. But I think it also comes down to like just that deeply rooted like community and customer culture that we have that actually drives everything. And if we weed it out in the interview process, like it's a large part of what we look for.
Yeah, I see this happening a lot actually with fintechs as they grow. When they start out, you know, they've only got 2 kind of groups of people really to worry about: their customers and their people. And they there's an equilibrium there. Yeah. And then when you get major investors come on board, it's kind of like there's 3 people, and so the balance is split. But invariably, you know, the priority always goes to the investors, you know, and banks at shareholders. And then kind of, you know, either the people or the customers then become, you know, second best, and somebody's left at the bottom. And I've seen very, very few organizations be able to kind of get that trifecta and the kind of perfect balance of that. And I guess, you know, it's interesting to hear you talk about the congruency within Beyond Bank when their customers are shareholders, essentially, and how that makes it easier then to be truly aligned with, you know, your actions are truly aligned with, you know, kind of the values that you've got up on the board as well.
Oh yeah, like I mean, like even with like in big banks, like I've worked in big banks my whole life. Like when we're talking about expenses, these people talk about like you need to think about the way you use, you know, your expenses or whatever as if it's your money. And like actually in mutual sector, it is your money. Like I'm a customer, I'm an owner of the bank. That like every dollar I spend is my money, and it's every customer's money. So it is actually like it's really genuinely close to, how you operate.
I'm really interested in your backstory. Now you've had a bit of a stellar rise. You've had a lot of recognition across the industry over the last 5-6 years or so. How did you first of all get started in banking?
Well, I've actually spent pretty much all of my career in banking, which I never did. Like, I feel like every time I take a job, I'm like, the next one's not going to be in banking because I must try something new. But I'm always drawn back because I actually really, like in a nerdy way, really love banking. I love the things that banks can do genuinely for their customers when they're super focused on them. I did start in consulting. So I worked at EY and KPMG. Many years ago, but even then it was kind of like tech and banking clients. And so career in banking, not necessarily the most typical CIO path though, because
what were you doing at the Big Four consultancies?
Oh, just consulting, like strategy, operating model, like generalist, grad level. They just put you on work, and it's fun and interesting.
The days when a grad job actually meant that you got to do things rather than being offshore to India.
You had to, and it was fun. Look, it was so fun because like I came out of uni, I did a double degree in commerce and IT, and I kind of was like, I don't necessarily know what I want to do, so I'll go into consulting because like that just kind of gives you a breadth of experience that is just. You get to do a lot of things. And I thought, I'll try something and I love it and whatever. And actually that's how I ended up at Westpac because they asked me to kind of, when they insourced a program, like, can you come and join? And I was like, yeah, great. And I did everything in those 12 years at Westpac from risk and compliance to product and distribution, strategy, innovation, enterprise transformation, and then tech. And in tech, like I've done heaps of stuff. Like I've worked across all the retail bank. I've run MarTech. I moved to NAB. I ran digital for all of the segments from retail to business to corporate and institutional. And that's been really, really great. And like every experience has been a really great experience. And as I was saying, like one of the coolest experiences of my life was working at Westpac when they did like first start that reinvention fund. And like,
so that was what, 2014?
Yeah, 2014. And it was like the boom. That's when they built, I watched like Stone and Chalk get built. And, like it was that like really, like it was such a boom. And I mean, you just don't get to do that stuff with big banks. And I thought, how cool. Like I work in this big bank, but I'm like literally working with all these cool like companies that are just, like grinding it out. And and like then you go to like running digital at now we're like 600 people globally, and like now I'm here at Beyond Bank and I'm the CIO and I'm really loving it. So another different turn.
I was talking to Greg McKenna from Police Bank a couple of weeks back about the challenges around talent and leadership, and what we both kind of agreed upon was particularly since I think the GFC, when a lot of the larger banks decided to offshore, outsource, kind of change the model. We've just not seen talent being given the opportunities to go and jump around like you have in every area of the bank, and therefore you kind of understand how everything works. And what you get now is a huge talent pool of people who are really good at doing one thing, but they don't know the impact of what they're doing has on other areas of the business. And it's really starting to become prevalent, particularly when you move into environments of the size of a Beyond Bank where you don't have that infrastructure, you don't have all of those disciplines, and you have to really kind of get across everything pretty quickly. How did you find having that kind of grounding of going and has enabled you now to move into Beyond Bank? Has it kind of set you up for success?
It really has. Actually, it positions me very well in this role. And I talk a lot about this when I'm talking to people, like mentoring people that kind of want a growth path in technology. I always say like, like most of the CIOs and most that are going to have like this very linear path where they've started as a developer and kind of grown their way up. And like technical grounding is really important, especially in a technical role. But as a CIO, the majority of my conversations with the board and the executive are not technical conversations. They are business conversations that happen to be grounded in technology. So having that lateral experience is very, very important as you get more senior in any company. And I found it's very surprising that like how many people in banks don't actually understand how a bank works.
Yeah.
And it's just my natural being, like if I'm doing something, I have to like unpack it and understand like how does this even work?
Yeah.
Like how do we get here?
Yeah.
So I've always like had that natural curiosity. So that's why I've kind of wanted to work in all parts.
Yeah, it drives my wife insane that I have to reverse engineer everything.
Yeah, I have to know how it works. And I think the thing with like these kind of smaller companies or like the mutual sector is actually there's nowhere to hide. So like that my recruitment process is really quite specific in the fact that I need people that are really experienced in what they've done. And even my senior people are hands-on. Everyone is hands-on because we just don't have the capacity to hire managers of things.
Yeah.
Like everyone's got to pull their weight. But the great thing about that is like a real radical accountability because you actually own something end to end. And a lot of people, when I talk to them and they've worked in like big kind of corps their whole life, they've always said, oh, like the thing I want in my development plan is to have more accountability or more end to end. And I feel like sometimes it's only possible if you go a little bit smaller.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that because over the last 8 years of running the business, the data that I've collected on just the fintech industry here in Oz shows that 90% of people who move from a big four bank or large corporate environment into a fintech startup, which I would class as 1 to 50 people, leave within the first 6 months. And the reason that's been given in most instances why the person didn't work out was a lack of accountability when mistakes were made. And I think kind of one of the things that's a real kind of paradox is that with accountability, so that Spider-Man quote, right? With great power comes great responsibility, right? And I think with accountability, there's a lot that comes with that sacrifice. Kind of ego has to go to one side. You have to, and also I think when you come into these types of environments, as one client put it to me, it's like literally I'm drinking from the fire hose. There's no let up, there's no break. It's like I'm trying to absorb everything, put out fires and everything else. And it's exhausting, right? And I'm trying to learn new stuff. And so when you put all of that together, it compounds. And you're going to make lots of mistakes. And I think what people worry about is the worry that if you make mistakes, you're going to get punished. I think the kind of critical thing that I've looked at in people when they all make that switch is where can I see that they've demonstrated growth mindset? What do they do outside of work? Where have they invested in themselves? What is their approach to failure? How self-aware are they?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm a really big fan of retros, and like my team will hear me on. They're like, we should just run a quick retro on that, and like a really good framework. We just kind of go like more, less, better, different.
Yeah.
Because you learn, and I think like part of like my leadership philosophy is always make it really safe for people to learn.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like everyone will make a mistake. The worst is when you're in an environment where people feel they need to cover it up. Because it is horrible when it's found out. And like, I'm always like, the fastest way is to stop the bleed. Like if we've made a mistake, that's okay. Like let's talk about it. Let's like quickly see what we have to do to fix it. And then like, let's do a quick retro and have a think about like how we could have done that better, or what's the things that we need to change in the environment or the ecosystem, whatever, so that we can not have that happen again, or what have we learned from this that will make us change our mind about the way we approach things.
It's really interesting you bring that up because one of the things that I've noticed is there's seems to be a growing kind of misconception that creating a psychologically safe environment is creating an environment that's comfortable and easy. And it's the exact opposite, right? Like, it's really uncomfortable, and you've got to be highly transparent and accountable. And with that creates the safety, right? Because you know that everybody's accountable and you've all got each other's backs. Whereas a lot of people when they're talking, kind of feel like, oh, well, I'm being put under pressure. I'd say, yeah, well, be put under pressure because you're not performing and you've got these things that you need to do that you're accountable for.
Then I don't know, I've noticed there's people that tend to shy away from feedback. And I know it's kind of age-old saying, but like feedback is a gift. Yeah. It really is. And, I even think to like myself, it is like I'd rather know like if I'm off mark or, like understand how I'm coming off, like way before that's, offended or like made some, like done something that like I didn't want to happen or whatever. And I'm really, like, I'm a very upfront person, very open. And like, I really encourage my team, like to challenge respectfully and like to be really clear, okay, like here's how this is like translating for me. And it's the only way that you really learn and like you will grow self-awareness from feedback in itself too, which is
and I think that's kind of one of the tricks that I've seen that the best leaders have developed is, people go for feedback and they go, oh, can you give me feedback? And they want feedback from an interview. Like, I can give you the feedback, but that person's only met you for an hour. Like, are they really the best person to give you feedback? They've just had a chat with you, and now I'm going to tell you all these things that you should be doing to get ahead in your career. I don't think they're the right person to be asking, right? And so there's this thing of, people ask for feedback, but what they don't really want it. They want validation. Whereas the best leaders that I've worked with, what I've noticed is that thing of self-awareness. They get feedback without even asking for it. They just absorb what's going on around them. Like, all right, pick something up in body language. They'll say something in a meeting. They'll see how somebody reacts and go, okay, that's feedback. You can ask that person then direct and say, hey, what did you think? They'll be, oh, yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah, it was great. I thought it was a fantastic idea. But, by the body language and some of the behaviors that they've got, that maybe that's not really how they feel. And I think that's kind of one of the things that really gets lost again in the whole, kind of quest to be a great leader is we talk about these things and we kind of then do them as a, regimented, almost like process rather than it being an art of how do I actually get better at influencing people? Like, how do I kind of pick up the signals around me?
Yeah. I'm a really big fan of like being genuine about your leadership. Like it's good to use frameworks and tools, and like a lot of that is like really helpful as you begin your career journey. But I think that like frameworks and tools don't always universally apply. And as you get more confident and more experience in leadership and leading people, you kind of learn to naturally like adjust the way you are and your tone and the way you approach things and, the level of empathy and all of that kind of stuff. And I just feel like if you are not genuine and transparent about, your team and how they're coming off and giving the feedback, then they're not going to learn. And like that doesn't help solve anything. So, open transparency is important.
Coming on the team, I would imagine one of the challenges perhaps that you have in a business the size of Beyond Bank because of budgets and money, etc., would be bringing in top talent from places where they're going to get paid more money. How have you managed to navigate that, and what's been your approach to bringing in talent?
So we always look for, as I said, people with highly skilled people, but people that are hands-on. And yes, you can't in a smaller organisation pay as much as like bigger organizations, or even if you do, like bigger organizations have the innate ability to just be like, oh, we'll just pay you 30 grand more and like stay. So you're not like attracting people on salary, you're actually attracting people to the purpose and the vision and the team and the culture. So a lot of what we look for, as I said in the beginning, is really like, are you going to fit that beyond bank culture? Are you inherently customer driven? Do you care about communities and the environment and society and all of that kind of stuff? Are you technically competent? Like, do you have the ability to go broad and deep? And the other thing is, like, we're in this really unique time where it's so exciting. So people are really attracted by the, like, potential of the organization. We've got a new CEO in Jake, who's kind of like 6 months old, new CIO, newish COO, new CMO. So like a large part of that executive is quite new, and a new business strategy and a potential merger of equals, and like just the potential to take this beautiful organization to such a bigger and grander level that, like, people are really like, yeah, I want to come and invest my time because I want to be part of that journey. And that's been really exciting.
Yeah.
You get the people that actually want to be part of this, as opposed to like, oh, I'm here to get a job and a title and money and bonuses and all of that.
How do you sell that to people? Because, you know, on the surface, and it's one of the really great things about the podcast, is it's such a powerful recruitment tool, right? Like I'll reach out to people because I'm headhunting. I'll say, hey, I've got this brief, you know, and they've not heard of the organization or don't know much about them. You know, and I'll say, hey, well, have a listen to this interview with the founder or the CEO, or, you know, let me know what you think. And, you know, people come back like, wow, I didn't realize that. You know, so it's a kind of power of, you know, but that's 45 minutes to an hour on a job ad or a piece of branding. It's really difficult to kind of get that message across to talent. How are you getting that across to them? Because it is such a noble cause. And, you know, one thing that the top talent all has, you know, in common, there's a few things, but one of them is, you know, they all want to be, you know, be part of building something, you know, and give back to society. Yeah.
No, we haven't. Like, we feature all of that. Like, we have rewritten all of our job ads to have that. Like, I purposely don't like put salaries and things on those job ads, because again, like, I don't want that message to be the message. Like, the message is like, come and join this org because here's what we want to do. Here's what we're about. If you want to be part of this, this is what I'm expecting. And I always have like a really early conversation with the people that kind of have come through that short list, about like all of that. Like, you know, here's the deal. This is it. Like, a job ad can talk to whatever, but like, here's what I want out of a person. And a lot of the way that I recruit is like through like industry, or like, you know, people, like if you've been around for a while, like, you're like, these are the good people, and you kind of got to then convince them, like, look, it's not going to be like a huge, like, this is not about you like getting the peak of your earning potential, but this is about you doing something great. And I know even for myself, when I was looking for my next role out of NAB, like, I also had to Google like, who is Beyond Bank? And like, I remember talking to people about my next move and saying, I just don't want to do the same thing over and over. I really want to do something great. And like, that is what attracted me, because of the potential to do something just really awesome in this business.
I think one of the beauties as well of just having transparent and upfront conversations with people is particularly when you're going out to people that you know, so you know they're going to be high caliber. When you're talking to people that are high caliber, they'll select themselves out the process if they don't think that they've got the ingredients there to be successful and to deliver what you need. And so it really speeds up the process, because you're not investing 3 months in somebody and they get to the end and you offer and they're like, oh, you know, it's just, and the reason people get, you know, second thoughts, because they've got to say, look, I'm not going to be successful here. And maybe I haven't covered all the questions that I need to, or I haven't got all the information, so I'll just pull out. And I think when you're just upfront and honest from the beginning, it just has a far, you know, and I've seen it with the processes. We invest more time in the briefing process, oftentimes, than we're doing the recruitment process, because once you get that right, you kind of, you know, the other part flows a lot faster.
Yeah. And I think, look, it's not for everyone, and that's okay. Like, and also you've got to take into consideration, you know, your like life stage and economic, you know, stability and all of that kind of stuff. Like, it's a tough time at the moment, but it, like, you know, where you know, the people we've attracted, that's okay. And like, they've actually been really attracted to the cause and, you know, doing cool things.
we're coming to a wrap. We're both fintech veterans. So you were there at the beginning when it was all kicking off in 2014. I actually made my first placement with a fintech in 2008 with Oz4X. So we've kind of been there very much from the beginning. It feels to me very much like the industry stagnated. A lot of that kind of initial excitement has dissipated. What's got you excited about fintech right now that you can kind of draw on from, those early days of reinvention that you go, hey, kind of, this is something that we should really get behind?
Well, I just love the fact that you've got these. So there's a couple of things. There's an avenue that, like, I honestly didn't have growing up. Like, when I thought about what could I do, or what do I want to be when I grow up? It was just like such a small box.
You've got a Big Four firm, right? Like, you followed, that was the path, right?
You just have to go to EY and get, which look, I'm not dissing, it was great grounding for me, but now, like,
but that was the path then, right?
Yeah,
like that was the best path to take, right?
You go and you get an internship over summer, and then you get a graduate thing, and that's really, it is really cool, and it's for some people, but like, now there's just so much choice. And so I'm so excited because, my daughter's going to grow up in a time where she, like, if she really feels something, like, passionate about something, she can go and like create a business out of that.
There's so many great examples of, female leaders in fintech, right? Like, I mean, I've got the same with my daughter who's 13, where, her idea of an entrepreneur is somebody like Simone Joyce, right? Like, whereas, Simone Joyce said to me, my idea of an entrepreneur when I was growing up was like a guy in a suit with a briefcase.
Yes.
Right? So it's amazing how, kind of these kind of pioneers now are creating pathways for the next generations, and the inspiration and the role model to go, hey, I can be that.
And to do something they actually care about, like, that they can wake up and feel really passionate about. And, like, I read, I don't know, 1,000 times on, like, Instagram, like, the marking of a good culture is, like, how you feel on Sunday about, like, going to work on Monday. And, like, if you have the choice to do something that you really love and feel passionate about and grow a business and an income and whatever, like, that's just amazing. So I really love that opportunity. And then I love that you have this, like, critical mass of these organizations that can help other bigger organizations. And you don't always have to go to the typical vendors, but you've got this, like, inherent competition that actually pushes the industry to go faster and greater. And if we didn't have those, like, I think big business gets complacent. And that's, like, that's not a good thing for industry as well. And, like, even as a consumer, having, like, new ways to pay and to experience, like, that pushing customer experience has been driven by, like, the smaller fintechs, because, like, big companies didn't have that. Like, they didn't have the competition initially, and now they really do. So it's like that speed and change is really, really cool.
Well, it's been awesome to catch up, Stevie-Ann. Before we do say goodbye, two things. One, we get awesome talent listening to this podcast.
Great.
If they're interested in finding out about careers at Beyond Bank, where's the best place for them to go?
Oh, they can go on our website. We've got a lot of our current postings. But, I mean, just drop me I'm good on LinkedIn. I'm terrible with email. People that email me just know they get lost in the sea of unread emails. But, like, LinkedIn, like, reach out. I'm really, like, excited to talk to people that are passionate about doing great things.
And I also get a lot of founders listening to this podcast who could have a solution that might be relevant. Awesome. Brilliant. Well, Stevie-Ann, fantastic to catch up. Great to hear everything's going well, and look, really encouraged to see amazing talent like yourself making the move to what are such noble causes.
Well, that's all for today's show, folks. Thanks to Stevie-Ann, and thanks to you for listening. If you're new to the show, make sure to give us a follow on your podcast player. And if you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. It really does mean a lot. Until the next episode, keep well. Fintech Chatter is brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you bring in world-class leadership talent to build world-class fintech ventures. And you can find us at tier1people.com.